What's up, Coach Emma here, and welcome back to the Fit Habit Life podcast, where we cut through the noise, talk real health and fitness, sustainable fat loss, and habits that actually work. And today I have a super special guest for my business networking group, Jared Fenn. He is the owner of Pillar to Post Home Inspection here in Utah County, kind of Salt Lake area as well. And they do things a little bit differently. So I thought it would be fun to have him on and chat about how his company is a little bit different. And yeah, so go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. So Pillar to Post, it's nationwide, and I took over here in 2006. And what kind of got me into this is I grew up doing construction, and my brother came out of, a summer sales job with a bunch of money. He was young, wanted to go buy a house, and it was this house built in 1896.
Wow.
Down in Provo, and it was a duplex. And so right off the bat, his first home, he's going to be a landlord, and he's buying this century-old home. And so I grew up doing construction. So he didn't do much construction growing up, and so he's like, Jared, come, I'm getting a home inspection. So I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. I'd bought a house. I never really had a home inspection, and so we went through the inspection, and it was just. I just remember walking away and seeing like how much he had spent on it and thinking, okay, I was just like kind of like, okay, great. I mean, the one thing that sticks out of my mind is the inspector sat there like showing him how the front door was rubbing on the carpet, and I'm like, really, 100-year-old home, and that's what we're focusing on, and and my brother didn't know the first thing about home ownership. I think I'd probably owned my home for about 5 or 6 years. So I realized, there's all kinds of stuff that you should get to know about your house. So anyway, I remember just kind of walking away like, man, what would it have been like if there was actually some education? There was some, so a few months later, I'm kind of just bored scrolling through business classifieds and see a home inspection business for sale. And I think, wow, if you could just kind of do the home inspection, but actually provide an education and actually help someone learn about their house. And that's where people spend most of their money and most of their time. So why not turn that into something a little bit more valuable? So that's kind of where it started. And so that was 18 years ago. And so I've really focused kind of more about the education and then just because of my own personal side of things and things with my own kids, my own home, I probably do a lot more on the healthy home side of things. And so that was kind of where we were talking about that there's a lot that goes on in people's home life that sometimes they don't realize how much that environment weighs into it. And so we have a lot of clients, and we work with a lot of other like remediation, mold remediation, and other companies that will send us business just because we don't do any repairs. We're just doing the testing. And so a lot of times we're kind of that neutral of, we're not trying to sell them on a service. We're just doing the test. So, so if someone comes in, so it's going to be this much money to clean up your house, and we're going to get rid of all of the chemicals. Well, how do I know there's chemicals? And so that's where we've kind of created this little niche of being able to do a lot of the testing for people. Obviously, most of our work is for people that are buying a home. But we have done a lot lately for homeowners, especially since the pandemic. So many people are more aware of their environment. We do a lot more testing for just people, mold testing and VOC testing, formaldehyde testing, all of these things that people 5 years ago weren't even really thinking about. So we've really branched more into those things. I teach a lot of CE classes, continuing education classes for real estate agents. And so some of those classes focus on a lot of these topics. So I've kind of taken a little bit more of a deep dive as far as your home and your health and how those things play together. So yeah, you could, like I said before, you can keep me talking for all kinds of stuff because this is what I do day in, day out.
Yes, yeah. No, but that's really awesome. And that's why I wanted to have you on because environment plays a huge role in your health. I mean, it can. Mold toxicity can affect every part of your overall health, metabolic health, brain function. Like there's so many things. And So just educating more people on those things, like maybe somebody has an issue and they're going and getting labs drawn and they look fairly normal. They tend to be fairly healthy, eat a well balanced diet, but they're still exhibiting symptoms. I mean, I guess I'm assuming in Utah it's pretty dry. Maybe mold might not be as common as like in Florida or other places, but you never know. And so it's just good to learn about these things because maybe there is something that you could be optimizing or cleaning up in your environment to just help you get better results long term. So, what prompted you to get into more holistic kind of home testing?
So I think some of it started, let's see, it'd probably be about 10 to 12 years ago. My son was young and just had lots of, there was just lots of things that we were looking at. Okay, why some of behavior issues and sleeping issues. He just was never sleeping well. And so obviously you as a parent, you're constantly on Google trying to figure out what are the options, what could be going on here, all these different things. And and so one thing kind of led with some of his behavioral was like, yeah, a lot of times in this 2 to 4 year old, sometimes those behavioral issues are a result of sleep. And so let's see, how can we improve the sleep? Well, we look at all these things, and one thing that we'd always notice is his breathing was always, he snored a lot. Snored a lot for a little kid, and that was kind of, that shouldn't be happening. He'd wake up a lot, and so we started. So that was one of the things that we started going down is what are allergies and what things could be, blocking his airways. So we went. We took him to allergists and we took him to ENTs and he had enlarged adenoids. They said, well, it might be a result of an allergy. And it's like, well, what allergies do we have? What could be triggering that? And so that was a lot of it where we started to see the correlation between behavior, overall health, immune systems. My wife her background is microbiology and genetics. So understanding the whole science and how your body works and stuff, that's what gets her excited. And so, so being able to explore those things. And so that was kind of the catalyst. So really deep diving on what the different molds do and what they mean and what different allergen triggers and different things. And just being in this field, I had access to a lot of testings, and so we did a lot of experiments and a lot of things that we could do and kind of try out. So that's kind of where the background came. But that's where a lot of the learning. So a lot of your home inspectors, for example, they like mold testing. So a lot of home inspection companies offer mold testing, but from a liability perspective and everything, we're taught you guys don't interpret the data. You're just there to collect a sample. And so that's one thing where I probably go way outside of the scope of what home inspectors do, because I'm fascinated. It's like, I understand. Okay, but learning not just, you've got these kind of molds in this quantity, go talk to a professional. And then they go talk to a professional, and that professional, we can clean it up. And there's that gap between, well, help me understand, how did I get here? What are the things? We just had a real interesting, just yesterday. This is going to kind of take a tangent, but this is the kind of stuff that makes me excited and gets me going as a home inspector and what I do and where I am, what got me here. This was just 2 days ago. A real estate agent, and he has a property management company. I've worked with him for a while, and he's like, hey, Jared, I need your help trying to figure out this mold problem at my parents' house. They've only been in there for a few years. And so he sends me all these pictures, and it was in their cold storage room. They had like these metal and wood shelving, but he sends me these pictures, and they're just maybe I'll send you the pictures if that makes sense to put together on some of these, because they were pretty horrific. You've got mold growing all over these. There was even
really
like dangling, like these things just dangling from the shelves, and he's like, mm-hmm. and that's kind of one of the things that a lot of people think, it's dry, we don't have to worry about it, but it is dry. But And so the first thing he says is like, yeah, this is in the cold storage room. It's under the porch. And so I say, oh, well, where does it face? Oh, it's northwest. Okay. So it was, just going through it, he's like, there's no plumbing. I can't figure out where it's going. And so he sent me just enough pictures and was like, oh, just doing this long enough, it's like, okay, here's what's happening. You have a cold storage room. It's basically a concrete box in the ground. Moisture is always going to travel from more moist to more dry. And because it's facing northwest, more than likely that afternoon sun is just cooking that porch. I said, send me some pictures of the outside. And it looks like there's fresh landscaping. So they're probably watering. And we do see more mold and moisture problems in basements this time of year because everybody's lawns are dying. So everybody cranks up the timers on their sprinklers, but they don't adjust them so that the lawn gets more water, but the flower beds next to the foundation gets less. So water starts coming in. And so that's why I said this is probably what's going on. More than likely, you've got the ground is saturated. Concrete's not waterproof. Water is going to soak in. It's going to get into that environment because now as the temperature rises, warm air can hold more moisture. So your relative humidity is always trying to balance out. And so as the afternoon sun heats up that cold storage room, makes it really hot and humid, it's now more dry. So it's going to draw more moisture out of the ground. But that's the kind of detective work of putting the pieces together, where what happens is most people will say, oh, I've got mold. They call the restoration company. The restoration company comes and cleans it up, but they don't do sprinklers. They don't do landscaping, and so other times people are like, well, maybe it's a plumbing problem. They call the plumber. Plumber's like, nope, I don't know what's going on. So that's where my role, where that's our job, is to be the generalist for all things home. And so trying to plug that into some of these other things has been fascinating for me. So yeah, you can get me on a lot of those tangents and examples, but yeah, back to the topic.
Yeah, that's crazy though. No, that's and that's good to know because I think, like with a lot of things, this is what I do with health, right? It's like I'm trying to understand why you're having these symptoms, and trying to pinpoint what the issue is. It could be life, it could be lifestyle, it could be life stressors, it could be diet, it could be exercise. It's probably a combination of all the things. But getting somebody who understands that and can figure out what the problem is and where it's coming from, well, that's invaluable. Because otherwise, if you call the restoration company and you restore it, then you're going to have to call them back every couple months to keep doing the same thing.
Right.
And you're not. And instead, what you do is you help people pinpoint, hey, this is what the problem is, and this is why it's happening, and here are some people I can connect you with to help you solve this problem forever.
Right. So, along those lines, I had one a couple of weeks ago where a client, we'd done the inspection about a year ago, and she's like, hey, how come you didn't tell us we had this problem? I looked back at the report, and I had done the inspection, so I wasn't one of my guys that had done it, and I was like, okay, because there wasn't really that big of a problem. She's like, oh, well, we've had people come out and it's a major problem. I'm like, all right, let me stop by and see what's going on. Stopped by their basement and had a ton of water, all kinds of, water damages and everything. And so the first thing they did was call the plumber. Plumber's like, well, I can put in a sump pump. We can pump this water out so you don't have any more problems. And it's like, okay, well, the house is like 20 years old and we've never needed a sump pump. So what's okay? But he says, well, maybe it's a landscaping issue. So they call a landscaper. And landscaper is like, well, yeah, the ground is not sloping well enough away from the house. Your inspector should have called that out. That's where she got frustrated with me. And I'm like, well, you do have a slope. It's not sloping away from the house. It's sloping toward your driveway, and then your driveway keeps sloping. I said, yeah, could it be better? Yeah. Could you do a sump pump? Yeah. But as we got talking, it was exactly what, that was probably what made the other deduction a little bit easier. It's like, well, yeah, we've been getting a lot of dry spots, so we just cranked it up. No one told us, because we just moved here, that you can't just like crank up the sprinklers, and we have sprinklers that are spraying against the foundation and all this water. And so the plumber had a good solution, and it would have fixed the problem. Well, it would have fixed the symptoms. It wouldn't really fix the problem. The landscaper could have fixed the symptoms, But really the problem was turn your sprinklers down, get a different type of sprinkler that's not overwatering. And so again, that's just where, having that holistic approach of really taking a step back. A lot of times when people call us, they have no idea what they're dealing with. They're Googling symptoms. And, so some examples, for example, my aunt called me and she's like, hey, my granddaughter, she's living in this apartment and I think it's full of mold because she's just been sick and having all these health issues. And so we looked at it and I asked her about it and it was like, have we looked at meth? I mean, has anyone ever tested for meth in the home? Because there are a lot of symptoms that overlap when people are living in a home that is contaminated with methamphetamines as what could be going on with mold. And so, once then she starts going down that path, Googling all this, like, oh yeah, let's look at that. And so sure enough, whether that's the cause and effect, she has a lot of other health issues anyway, but yeah, the meth was higher than it should have been.
Wow.
And wasn't above the contamination level, so it needed to be remediated. And so another time we had a client call and she said, hey, I've been having a lot of health problems. And you did our inspection, and I can't find some of the she was trying to figure out, looking back at old tests to try to figure out, because her doctor couldn't figure out what was wrong. And just in the matter, the time of just talking, okay, what's going on? This was a multi-million-dollar house up in Draper. What are you planning on doing with the house? Oh, we're going to renovate this, this, and this. And so we started talking about renovations. And she started telling me her symptoms. Well, every time, I just thought I was sick. There's a lot of colds. This was like February, so it's that time of year when everybody kind of has a cough, a little bit of an issue. She's like, but we went out of town for, a few weeks, and I felt great. And I got home, and so it's something in this home because now I feel sick again. Okay, so she's like, my doctor says I need to find these old reports, and I think we'd only done a radon test, and radon usually doesn't have that immediate effects. Radon's more of a long-term exposure, long-term health risk. And so the first thing I said was, did you do all those improvements? Oh yeah, there was this huge kind of studio above the garage, and she's like, that's my workspace. We did a bunch of built-ins. We did all this. I'm like, oh, okay, well, did you realize that there's a lot of formaldehyde in a lot of the cabinetry and a lot of, carpeting and all that, those press boards and everything. And so, all of her symptoms matched people that have sensitivities to formaldehyde.
Wow.
And so we were able to go down that path to do a formaldehyde test. Yeah, it was really high. Now you have like a plan of action, of course, that you can go rather than just, what is it? So a lot of times what we're doing is not so much a slam dunk like some of these, but a lot of times it's like, I have these symptoms. Okay, well, we kind of have to start ruling out stuff. And so a lot of the work that we do, especially with people where there's not a clear, there's something in my house that's making me sick.
So what are some common things that make people sick or could cause people to have symptoms? And I guess we'll start with those, and then what are the symptoms that could be a red flag that there might be something off in your home environment? So
actually that first one's probably easier to answer. And it's usually where we start is, how do I know it's my house and not something else? And usually the biggest trigger is you go away for the weekend, you go stay in an Airbnb, you do whatever, you're out of your home, and you then feel worse when you're in your home. So back about 20 years ago, they had a term they would use a lot called the sick house syndrome. Now they know that that's more related usually to formaldehyde exposure. It can be mold, but it's just a home that doesn't breathe. It doesn't have a good fresh air supply. Then you're going to start having symptoms. So some of those symptoms, usually the symptoms that I hear about where people are reaching out is, some sort of respiratory or neurological. So I always have a headache. I always have a, scratchy throat. My nose is always stuffed up. My eyes are itchy. In extreme cases, they might get like a rash or hives that will start to break out. The problem is methamphetamine exposure can cause this. Mold can cause this. VOCs can cause this. formaldehyde, all of those can cause those. And so usually it's a matter of, well, have you done any tests that you know you have sensitivities? If they have, then we have a path we can go down. But usually it's process of elimination. And so that's what I tell a lot of people when it comes to air quality. It's more a process of elimination rather than a process of discovery. It's not like, okay, we're going to go do this. It's more like, okay, let's start with the easiest one and cheapest one, and then we'll start ruling it out from there. And
that makes a lot of sense. What is a VOC?
VOC, so volatile organic compounds. So there's a huge array of chemicals, and those chemicals can mimic different hormones, all of those different things, and different exposure to some of those. So you're going to have VOCs in a lot of your cleaners. So if you ever have someone that's like, yeah, when I use these certain cleaners, or when I get around people that have certain perfumes, I get a headache, or those are usually VOC related. The issue is that some VOCs can start to compromise your immune system and make you more sensitive to molds that might not be that big of a deal. And so there's this compounding effect on it all. And that's the other thing too, when it comes to air quality, is you don't always have to fix everything. Now, it's like, I have a peanut allergy, and yes, I avoid peanuts, and that keeps me healthy. But most people don't have those specific allergies or triggers. Most people, it's just your body is trying to, in one of the classes they explain it's like a bucket, and our body can handle this bucket full of crap day in, day out. But eventually that bucket overflows, and then we start to feel sick. And so I
use that analogy with stress too. It's like our body can handle quite a bit, but if you overfill that bucket, then you're going to start to see the negative repercussions.
Well, and I think stress, and I think other pollutants and all of that kind of all go into that same bucket because your body is trying to deal with stuff, and if it's trying to deal with stress, then that bucket gets smaller. If you go into an environment where there's a lot more pollutants, well, that bucket just filled up faster. And so that's what we're trying to figure out is you don't have to empty the bucket. You just have to keep it from overfilling. And so sometimes, and that's definitely the case when it comes to air quality, is you're never going to fix everything. But if you can reduce it all a little bit, then that's going to improve your quality of life. And that's one of the things I teach in my air quality class is you don't have, there's so many pollutants and things that we're encountering every day in our homes. And you don't have to get rid of everything, but you can improve your quality of life just by lowering that threshold a little bit that's not pushing you over the edge. And it's compounded because, for example, if maybe it's dust. Most dust in homes is actually that triggers an air quality response or an allergic response as a result of dust mites. Dust mites like to feed on skin cells. So if you have pets in the home that are constantly shedding, that puts a lot of dust and dander into the carpet. Dust mites like to feed on that. And so then you have pollens. And so all of these things, if these are, well, I'll take you back to, what got me here. So another thing was my daughter had a lot of hay fever when she was younger. She would, and she would wake up, she'd be all stuffy, and she had this almost like claustrophobia that if she couldn't breathe through her nose, she'd start to panic. And so it was like, okay, we got to figure this out. I had a lot of allergies, especially as a kid. And so, leveraging, okay, what I know about dust and all of that, every time she would start to get to that, we would just deep clean her bedroom. It was pull off all the sheets and everything, pull down the curtains, shampoo the carpets, dust every surface, and that would make a difference. During times of the year when she would start to, when it was more of a pollen related thing, and we knew it was like, oh, it's that time of year. One trick that I learned from someone was you just take a box fan and put a furnace filter, kind of a little bit nicer furnace filter on the back side, and just let that run. And that's going to pull out any of those pollens, those pollutants. And so we just set that in her bedroom at night, and that would be circulating the air and pulling out those pollutants. And it was less that she needed to be breathing in at night. And so there's a lot of little things that you can do And if you can just kind of lower that threshold, not only are you going to feel better, but you're going to sleep better, which then is going to,
improve everything.
Right.
Your ability to detoxify and handle that load.
Exactly.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
It's almost like that better sleep makes your bucket bigger, and then you're able to handle a lot more. So
yes. So firstly, what are some things that we can, I guess, help mitigate? Like, obviously there's air quality. Are there any other things that we can do to improve the quality of our home environment to help?
Yep. So the first one that I always tell people, and even when people call me with all these symptoms, I'm like, look, before we spend a bunch of money, just go do that filter trick. And a lot of people, you don't even have to go to that extreme. Most people have a forced air furnace and air conditioning, so that's already circulating all the air throughout the house. And if they just on your thermostat, there's usually an option that you can either have the fan running continuously or auto. And so when it's on the auto setting, then it will blow air when it needs to cool or heat the room. But if you have it on continuously, it's going to be blowing and circulating that air 24/7. And so that's the first thing I tell people is just go get a little bit better filter, change it more frequently, and have that fan running 24/7. Because if you go buy a room purifier, all it's doing is it's a fan blowing through a filter. So why not leverage one that you already have in your home and take advantage of that? And that can make a big difference. Or I'll tell people to do the box fan trick, try that out for a week and see if anything improves. Because we want to know, is it something floating around in their air? And if it is, then we can say, okay, well, maybe it's mold or it's allergens, and we can do some different tests. But if that doesn't make any difference, well, then maybe it's chemical. And so then we need to look at VOCs, and we need to look at some other things that way. We usually go through, for example, formaldehydes are mostly in new products. So if you've done renovations, if you've done new carpeting, new cabinets, new furniture, any of those kinds of things, formaldehyde usually dissipates within the first 18 months. So if you've got a lot of that, and formaldehyde is a really teeny tiny molecule, and air filters and purifiers aren't going to do a whole lot. Really, the best method for formaldehyde is dilution. So that's opening up your windows, getting fresh air, and that's going to help dilute it until it can dissipate and get out of your home. And so there's a lot of things that people can try without spending a ton of money, because the reality is a lot of these tests, VOCs, if you're going to, I think our fees are around $500 per level of the home, to run all those tests. And formaldehyde, you're, $300-400 per level of the home. Mold testing is a little bit cheaper and a little bit faster, and so that's usually the first one when people just say, I don't know, I just feel bad in my house. We'll do a spore sample. We just take an air sample to see what kind of mold spores might be floating around in the air. Because if that one is an issue, okay, we're not going to focus on anything else, and can we get that taken care of? So
yeah, we have a very similar approach to things, I'd say. It's like do the big rocks first.
Yep.
And what are like the easy levers to pull that will give you the biggest return on your investment without having to spend money on these fancy tests and gizmos.
Right.
Because you probably will have some of those problems, and you'll probably need to do these things anyway to help. So might as well try them first.
Right. Yep. And just get those out of the way, save yourself some money, and yeah. So like me, we still do the box fan trick. We still, if people are having lots of issues, get rid of your carpets. Carpeting is a big one.
Yeah.
So one of the tests we do is an allergen test where we're looking for some of the 5 most common allergy triggers, which are dogs, cats, 2 different kinds of dust mites, and cockroaches. Which luckily we don't have a ton of cockroach problem here in Utah, but cockroaches and dust mites are some of the leading triggers for asthma among children. And so knowing what your load and what your burden is with those allergens can sometimes be an issue. So as an experiment, we, just to give you the timeline, before we had kids, we had 2 dogs. In about an 8-month period, we'd remodeled, so we had new carpeting in our living room, and we had our 2 dogs. But within that 8-month period, both of them passed away, and we had a new child. And so in that 8-month window, we new carpet, 2 dogs, but then they were gone, and then a new child, and you're always with your first child, you're super paranoid about being clean. And so for the next several years, we're constantly cleaning and shampooing the carpets and doing everything. Fast forward 6 years, I do the allergen test where we vacuum the carpet and we take a dust sample and send it off. The dog allergen triggers are still super high. So even after 6 years of shampooing and vacuuming, those allergen triggers are still there. There was also this, we got a cat, but my daughter and I are both allergic to cats, but we got a cat that stays in our garage. But there was this 2-month where we kind of had the cat in this crate in our living room while it was kind of getting used to, kind of being ready to put out in the garage. And 6 years later, that also, the cat allergens were also really high. So if you have a lot of sensitivities, carpeting just is not helping you.
Yeah, I had asthma like really badly as a kid, and my parents' house was like pretty old. I'd say at the time it was probably made in the 60s, and when I was probably like 6 or 7, we got rid of all the carpets in the whole house, and that helped a lot with that. And part of my asthma is an autoimmune condition too, so if your lifestyle isn't optimized, you will probably exhibit symptoms. So actually, I don't really have it anymore, or it's in remission or whatever. But yeah, that was a big one. Doing that and getting like an air filter in my bedroom for sleeping, that helped tremendously.
Yep. So just some other Utah issues, like you mentioned, like, oh, we don't, we're a dry climate. I think because of that, we end up actually seeing a lot of mold problems because people, no, I shouldn't have a mold problem, but we find in crawl spaces, in cold storage rooms, in attic spaces, places that aren't, they're kind of out of sight, out of mind, we do find a lot of mold problems. I would say, we're doing a lot more mold testing with our inspections now, with just people buying a house, so they don't really know if there's a mold problem. They just want to make sure they're not buying a house with a mold problem. And so we're doing a lot more random tests, you might say. And I mean, if I just had to off the cuff tell you, I'd say, 15 to 20% of the ones that we test have mold. Not like severe, but for anyone who's concerned about their health, it's in that range. And so there is a lot more mold out there, and it might just be, a toilet's been leaking, underneath the flooring for a while. It could be, basement, a lot of times if you find water in your basement, it's been going on for a while and it's probably a lot worse. There's stucco problems. We have a lot of stucco homes, and we've seen a lot of mold that can get in the stucco and inside the walls.
Really?
And so there's lots of scenarios where all you need is moisture. And so we live in a dry climate, but we still water our lawns, and we still have plumbing that leaks, and
a lot of people run humidifiers, so that can contribute tremendously, I'm sure. Like maybe the humidifier spilled on a carpet and then it wasn't cleaned up properly, and then they continue to run the humidifier or something random like that.
Well, and I remember in one of the classes they were talking about humidifiers, and it was basically there was an unfinished basement, and there were some things like blankets and just kind of old carpet, those kind of, a lot of people tossed down in the unfinished basement. And one of the kids was going down there and playing around and everything, and some of it was moldy, but they didn't really know it. And so he started having symptoms, he went back upstairs to play, and so all of those spores that he got all over him were all over his bedroom. And then he started, getting sick, so he stuck a humidifier in there. Well, it didn't help, so they actually stuck 2 humidifiers in there. And by the time, by the time they realized this is more of a mold issue, this isn't just a cold or a, viral or bacterial, was crazy. It was all over in the bedroom, not growing, but there's enough in there that it was causing issues. And so yeah, humidifiers can be helpful. In my air quality class, we talk about how because of our dry climate, not having enough humidity, it kind of weakens that immune system, that mucosa barrier. And so if you don't have enough humidity, then we're more susceptible to allergens and bacteria and viruses and all those things. But we also have a climate where if we increase the humidity too much, especially where we have really severe winters, you get like the scenario that we were talking about at the beginning with the cold storage room, where moisture just doesn't handle those changes and extremes of temperature and humidity and things. So we live in a dry climate, but we still just have as many mold problems as many other places.
That's crazy. I'm glad we tested mold then when we got our house. Because I was like, are you serious? My husband is like more paranoid. He's like, we just have to make sure. And I'm like, okay, might as well, while they're in there looking at everything else, check for mold. But that's good to know. So what are like some symptoms that you could have mold overgrown in your home somewhere?
So usually when people reach out and they're having some of those issues, it's usually respiratory, I would say would be the first one. As you get more complicated, fatigue, and then it kind of just starts spilling out, and that's where it gets really hard. It gets more into the functional medicine realm, because it's breaking down your immune system. It's triggering. Well, I'm not sleeping as well, so it's triggering this other thing. But I would say, like at the beginning, it's going to be more respiratory. Especially in kids. Kids are going to be more susceptible to it, just because their respiratory isn't fully functioning yet, and so you might get kids that are just, wow, he's just had stuffy, runny nose, and he's and that's the thing too that's really hard, because you're going to see more mold problems in the wintertime. In the wintertime, it's a lot drier, so our immune system isn't going to work as well, but we're heating things up. You have the cold outside, and anywhere where you have warm hitting cold in a home, you have a potential for moisture. So if your attic isn't very well insulated and you're heating up your home and that warm air is going up into your attic, when it hits that cold underside of the roof, it forms condensation. If you have your blinds or your curtains covering your window, but the warm air is still getting in there and hitting that cold window, it's going to drip down and form condensation. And if you aren't cleaning out that tract, that window tract is dust, which has a lot of organic material, skin cells, carpet fibers. Now you've got moisture, you've got a food source, and you can start growing mold in the window tracts.
That's crazy. Well, I guess that makes sense. Like when you go camping, in a tent, you wake up in the morning, there's condensation on the walls. If you turn over, I've had experiences where I turn into the wall of the tent and all the water falls on me. I'm like, what the heck?
Yep,
this is
all
terrible.
that condensation. So that we do see a lot of just condensation related. So in the wintertime, so back to what symptoms, it's not just like, oh, well, it's wintertime. Yep. There's sicknesses going around. Yes, but there are things in your home that you can be doing to just minimize that. Even just having, like I said, that fan going is going to help pull more out of the air to improve air quality, sleep quality, all of that. I mean, we could go on and on of all the what to do. But as symptoms, for me, the biggest thing is if you just notice that you don't feel as good in your home as you do when you're elsewhere, then there should be some things that you're looking at to kind of rule out.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about this stuff. I'm no expert. I know little things here and there, so it's cool to have somebody on here who can do a deep dive. And I'm still learning lots too. So, but that's what fascinates me is like, oh, I didn't know that could happen that way. All right, let's go figure this out. So So what would you like to leave our audience with as like the final thing?
I would say that the final thing is know that there is a resource out there. Home inspectors are a great resource. Most people only think of home inspectors when they're buying a house, but it is a whole resource that we don't do any repairs, but we have that holistic view of a home. That's our job, is to be able to give an overall assessment of a home when someone's buying it. But when you're living in a home, we're a great resource to help you know, okay, well, should I call a restoration company? Should I call the plumber? Should I call the landscaper? It's the old Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? And I think home inspectors, for a lot of home things, are a great resource.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great way to end the episode. So where can our listeners find you?
So Jared Fenn team at Pillar to Post. So pillartopost.com, like I said, you're going to get all over. You can plug in a zip code and you'll get whatever the closest Pillar to Post. But my team, jaredfennteam.com, is probably the easiest way to find us.
Awesome. I'll link that in the show notes, and I'll probably put your Facebook or social media or something in there if you'd like to, just so if people wanted to connect with you that way too, they can do that.
Yep, and that's a great one to see all the crazy stuff we see in, day out. I'm sure never a dull day in our line of work. So it's a great one to connect with us on social media.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime. Maybe we'll do a deep dive into a particular topic next time.
Yeah.
You can go into all the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah, we can look at some mold reports and see what people are breathing on a day in, day out.
Oh,
maybe you don't want to.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and thank you for everyone who listened to this. If you resonated with this episode or learned something or want to share it, please do that. The more people that see this, the more people we can help. So anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.